They thought she was just another tired woman with a strange accent and a worn-out duffel, so they humiliated her. Right there, in the middle of the airport, they dumped her bag and out fell a Navy uniform, medals, a badge. The crowd gasped. The agents panicked. But what no one knew, she wasn't just a decorated officer. What happens when a hero is treated like a threat? Just moments before the real threat strikes. Before we begin, send a quick wave in the comments. Tell me your city, your country, your vibe. It's amazing how stories like this echo across the world. Lieutenant Commander Iris Valdez shuffled through the crowded terminal of Miami International Airport, her worn duffel bag weighing heavily on her shoulder. After weeks of maintaining her cover identity in Eastern Europe, her body ached for rest. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed harsh against her tired eyes, and the constant chatter of travelers echoed through the vast space. She caught a glimpse of herself in a nearby window reflection. Her usually neat black hair fell in messy waves around her shoulders, and her civilian clothes looked as rumpled as she felt. The simple jeans and faded t-shirt were a far cry from her crisp naval uniform, but they had served their purpose during her classified mission. Iris took a deep breath, trying to center herself. The weight of the past few weeks pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than her duffel bag. She'd seen things during this mission that would take time to process, but right now, all she wanted was to make it through security and head home. The crowd surged around her, families rushing to catch flights, business people striding purposefully toward their gates, tourists dragging oversized luggage. No one paid attention to the exhausted Latina woman making her way through the terminal. That's exactly how she preferred it after weeks of staying under the radar. Her training kept her alert despite her fatigue. Even now, she couldn't help but scan her surroundings, noting exits and checking faces, habits that had become second nature during her years of service. As a decorated Navy Reserve officer with specialized intelligence training, situational awareness was deeply ingrained. Iris joined the line for security, fighting to keep her eyes open. The mission had demanded everything from her, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She'd maintained her cover identity flawlessly, speaking with the slight accent she'd perfected during her preparation, becoming someone else entirely to gather the intelligence needed. A young mother struggled with a stroller in front of her, and Iris automatically stepped forward to help, steadying the wobbling contraption. The woman smiled gratefully, and for a moment, Iris felt a connection to her old life, to the community she'd grown up in. Her working-class Latino neighborhood had taught her the importance of looking out for others, a value that had led her to military service. "Thank you," the mother said, and Iris nodded, her throat tight with unexpected emotion. She missed speaking normally, without having to think about every word and inflection. The accent she'd adopted for her cover still clung to her tongue, making her feel like a stranger in her own country. The security line inched forward. Iris fought against the heaviness in her limbs, remembering the pride she'd felt earning her rank through merit and dedication. Now she just wanted to blend in with the crowd, to be anonymous for these last few moments before returning to her regular duties. But as she approached the security checkpoint, she noticed the subtle shifts in attention. The way certain officers' eyes lingered on her disheveled appearance, her ethnic features, the slight accent she couldn't yet shake. She recognized the signs of profiling. She'd seen it before, both in her professional life and growing up. The fluorescent lights seemed to grow brighter, more interrogating. Iris straightened her shoulders slightly, maintaining her dignity despite her exhaustion. She'd completed countless missions, earned commendations she couldn't even talk about, and yet here she was, drawing suspicious glances because of how she looked and sounded. Her fingers brushed against the hidden pocket in her duffel bag where her military ID rested. She could easily prove who she was, but that wasn't the point. She shouldn't have to. The irony wasn't lost on her, returning from a mission serving her country only to be viewed with suspicion on American soil. Iris moved forward as the line progressed, her legs feeling heavier with each step. The noise of the airport seemed to fade in and out, like waves washing against her consciousness. She focused on staying alert, knowing she couldn't let her guard down completely until she was home. A child's laughter cut through her fatigue, and she turned to see a little girl chasing soap bubbles near the waiting area. The simple joy on the child's face reminded Iris why she did what she did: to protect innocent people, to make the world a little safer, even if no one would ever know about most of her contributions. The security checkpoint loomed closer. Iris took another deep breath, squaring her shoulders despite her exhaustion. She'd faced far more challenging situations during her career, but somehow, this moment felt particularly poignant. Here she was, a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy Reserve, about to be scrutinized, not for her actions or abilities, but for her appearance and accent. The fluorescent lights continued their merciless glare as she waited her turn, her worn duffel bag a reminder of the classified mission she'd just completed. Around her, the airport buzzed with activity, oblivious to the quiet strength of the woman standing in line, a decorated officer who had chosen to serve, despite moments like these. Senior Agent Marcus Blackwood stood at his post, scanning the security line with practiced efficiency. 20 years of experience had taught him to spot potential threats, and something about the disheveled woman with the worn duffel bag caught his attention. Her dark eyes darted around the terminal, a behavior he'd flagged countless times before. "Ma'am, please step over here," Blackwood called out, gesturing to the separate screening area. He noticed her slight hesitation, another red flag in his mental checklist. The woman, he glanced at her boarding pass, Iris Valdez, moved toward him with a controlled grace that seemed at odds with her rumpled appearance. "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked. The accent in her voice, though slight, made Blackwood straighten to his full height. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and something about this woman wasn't adding up. "Random additional screening," he announced, loud enough for his team to hear. "Please place your bag on the table." Other passengers shuffled past, some casting curious glances their way. Blackwood noticed how Ms. Valdez maintained perfect posture despite her obvious fatigue, another detail that struck him as unusual. "Of course," Iris replied evenly, placing her duffel bag where indicated. "Though I would appreciate some privacy for any personal searches." Her polite but firm request made Blackwood's jaw tighten. In his experience, people who asked for special accommodations often had something to hide. "We'll conduct the screening according to standard procedures, ma'am." More travelers were beginning to notice the interaction. A young couple lingered nearby, whispering to each other. An elderly man shook his head disapprovingly, though Blackwood couldn't tell if the disapproval was directed at him or the woman he was screening. "I understand, sir," Iris said, her accent more pronounced now. "I simply request the dignity of a private screening room, as is my right under TSA regulations." Blackwood felt heat rise in his neck. How did she know TSA regulations? Another red flag. "Ma'am, I need you to cooperate with the screening process as directed." "I am cooperating, Agent Blackwood," she replied, reading his name tag. Her calm demeanor only served to irritate him further. "I'm simply requesting a professional courtesy." The growing audience of onlookers made Blackwood more determined to assert his authority. He gestured to one of his female officers. "Officer Chen will conduct a pat-down here. Then we'll inspect your bag." Iris remained still, her dark eyes meeting his. "Sir, I must insist on privacy for any physical search. I'm happy to comply with all security measures, but I know my rights as a passenger." A small crowd had formed now, with more people watching the confrontation unfold. Blackwood could feel their stares boring into him, challenging his authority. He'd dealt with difficult passengers before, but something about this woman's quiet confidence set him on edge. "Your accent," he said, letting the words hang in the air. "Is it Eastern European?" "That's not relevant to the security screening, sir," Iris replied, her voice steady despite the implied accusation. Blackwood stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, suspicious behavior and resistance to standard screening procedures will only make this process more difficult. "I'm not resisting," Iris said, maintaining her composure even as other passengers began recording the interaction on their phones. "I'm requesting a lawful accommodation while fully complying with security protocols." The tension in the air was palpable now. Blackwood could hear the murmurs of disapproval from the crowd, but he refused to back down. He'd learned to trust his instincts over 2 decades of service, and everything about this woman raised red flags. Her calculated responses, her knowledge of regulations, the accent he couldn't quite place. "Last chance to comply with the screening as directed, Ms. Valdez," he said, emphasizing her name with subtle skepticism. Iris stood her ground, dignity evident in every line of her body, despite her disheveled appearance. "I am complying, Agent Blackwood. I simply request that any physical search be conducted in a private screening room with a female officer present, as per TSA guidelines." More phones were recording now. Blackwood could feel the situation slipping away from him, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. The woman's continued poise, despite his pressure, only convinced him further that she was hiding something. "Officer Chen," he called out, his voice sharp with authority. "Proceed with the pat-down." Iris didn't move, her eyes never leaving his face. "Sir, I will not consent to a public pat-down. I know my rights, and I am requesting a private screening room." The crowd had grown larger, their whispers more insistent. Blackwood could feel his control over the situation eroding with each passing second, but he'd gone too far to retreat now. This woman, with her mysterious accent and too perfect knowledge of procedures, had challenged his authority in front of dozens of witnesses. He couldn't let that stand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice hard with suppressed anger, "your continued non-compliance is becoming an issue." Blackwood's patience snapped. The growing crowd of onlookers, the whispers, and most of all, this woman's unwavering composure pushed him over the edge. Without warning, he grabbed the worn duffel bag from the table. "Let's see what you're so intent on hiding," he announced loudly, his voice echoing through the terminal. Before anyone could react, he turned the bag upside down and violently shook it, sending its contents scattering across the polished floor. The sound of items hitting the ground echoed through the suddenly silent terminal. Clothes tumbled out first, but not the civilian garments one might expect. Instead, carefully folded military uniforms spilled across the floor, their crisp lines now crumpled and dirty against the terminal tiles. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as something metallic clattered and rolled across the floor. A young boy pointed. "Look, Mommy," he exclaimed, his voice carrying in the hushed terminal. "Those are military medals?" Indeed, service medals and ribbons lay scattered among the uniforms, their polished surfaces catching the fluorescent lighting. Official documentation, with classified markings and military insignia, spread out like fallen leaves, some sliding several feet away from where Blackwood stood frozen in place. Iris remained perfectly still, her face a mask of controlled emotion as she watched her personal belongings and symbols of service laid bare for hundreds of strangers to see. The terminal had gone completely quiet, except for the sound of phones recording and the occasional whisper of recognition spreading through the growing crowd. "Oh my God," a woman in the crowd said loudly. "She's military." "Not just military," an elderly man in a Vietnam veteran's cap spoke up, his voice trembling with anger. "Those are officers' insignia. Naval intelligence, from the looks of it." The crowd's mood shifted palpably. What had begun as casual rubbernecking transformed into outright indignation. Phones recorded everything, capturing the moment when Blackwood's face changed from righteous authority to dawning horror. A distinguished-looking woman in a business suit stepped forward from the crowd. "This is absolutely disgraceful," she declared, her voice carrying across the terminal. "Treating a service member like this?" More voices joined in, the whispers becoming a chorus of disapproval. She tried to request privacy. "He just dumped her uniforms on the floor. Those are classified documents. Someone call his supervisor?" Officer Chen, who had been standing nearby, rushed forward to begin gathering the scattered items. Her hands trembled as she carefully picked up each medal and ribbon, treating them with the reverence they deserved. Other TSA officers shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact with their superior, others moving to help collect the military belongings. Through it all, Iris maintained her composure, though her exhaustion was now plainly visible to everyone watching. She slowly knelt down and began gathering her uniforms, handling each piece with care despite their soiled state. The sight of a decorated officer on her knees, collecting her humiliated dignity piece by piece, only served to intensify the crowd's reaction. "This is going viral," someone in the crowd announced, holding up their phone. "I'm sending this to every news station in Miami." Blackwood stood rooted to the spot, his face ashen as the full impact of his actions sank in. The medals, the uniforms, the classified insignia, everything he'd just thrown on the floor spoke of years of dedicated service and sacrifice. His hands, which had so confidently gripped the duffel bag moments ago, now hung limply at his sides. A young soldier in civilian clothes broke from the crowd and knelt beside Iris. "Ma'am, please let me help you," he said, carefully gathering some of the scattered documents. Others followed his lead, creating a stark contrast between those helping the officer and Blackwood's rigid immobility. "Those are her medals of service," an older woman said, her voice thick with emotion, "just thrown on the floor like trash." The terminal had become a scene of spontaneous solidarity as more passengers moved to help, forming a protective circle around Iris as she methodically reclaimed her belongings. The phones kept recording, capturing every moment of the aftermath of Blackwood's impulsive action. Through it all, Iris's calm dignity only highlighted the shameful nature of what had just occurred. She accepted the help graciously, thanking each person who handed her a recovered item. Her composed behavior in the face of such humiliation made Blackwood's actions seem even more egregious. "Lieutenant Commander," Officer Chen read from one of the documents she was carefully gathering, her voice carrying in the hushed terminal. The revelation of Iris's rank sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. More phones emerged, more recordings began as the scene continued to unfold in the middle of Miami International Airport's busy terminal. The scattered contents of the duffel bag had done more than expose Iris's identity. They had exposed the ugly consequences of unchecked authority and prejudice. Each medal, each uniform piece, each classified document that had been so carelessly thrown to the floor told its own story of service, sacrifice, and dedication to duty. And now, hundreds of witnesses stood watching as these symbols of honor were gathered up from where they had been so thoughtlessly discarded. As the crowd continued helping Iris gather her belongings, a metallic glint caught everyone's attention. A distinguished-looking elderly man in a veteran's cap bent down, his hands trembling, as he carefully lifted something from the floor. His eyes widened with recognition. "Dear Lord," he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "this is a Congressional Medal of Honor." The revelation sent a fresh wave of shocked murmurs through the gathered crowd. Phones raised higher, cameras focusing on the nation's highest military decoration as it rested in the veteran's weathered hands. People pressed closer, trying to get a better look at the medal that represented the pinnacle of military valor. "That's impossible," Blackwood blurted out, his voice pitched higher than usual. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he looked from the medal to Iris and back again. The weight of what he'd done crashed down upon him, but instead of accepting his mistake, panic drove him to double down. "This is stolen valor," he announced loudly, pointing an accusing finger at Iris. "She's impersonating a military officer to avoid security protocols. This is a federal offense." The crowd's reaction was immediate. Confused looks passed between onlookers as they tried to reconcile Blackwood's accusation with the dignified woman before them. Officer Chen, still helping gather documents, looked up at her superior with disbelief. "Sir, these documents appear authentic," she said quietly, trying to defuse the situation. "Call for backup," Blackwood ordered, his voice cracking. "We have a security situation." More TSA agents rushed toward the scene, responding to their superior's call. They formed a loose circle around Iris, who remained remarkably composed despite the escalating situation. She continued carefully gathering her belongings, accepting each recovered item with quiet grace. As the chaos unfolded around her, something caught Iris's attention. Her trained eyes, sharp despite her exhaustion, spotted movement near Gate B15. A well-dressed man in his late 40s moved purposefully through the terminal, followed by 3 young women. Their body language set off immediate alarm bells in Iris's mind. The women's movements were too controlled, too rehearsed. Their eyes remained downcast, and they stayed precisely 2 steps behind the man, Victor Smith. The target she'd spent months tracking across Eastern Europe was here, operating in plain sight while airport security focused on humiliating her. Iris's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as she watched them disappear into the crowd. The trafficking kingpin she'd been hunting was escorting 3 more victims through the airport while she knelt on the floor gathering her scattered medals. "Ma'am," one of the newly arrived TSA agents said, "we need you to come with us." "She's been carrying falsified military documents," Blackwood insisted, his voice growing louder with each word, "and impersonating a decorated officer. This is a serious federal crime." The elderly veteran who had found the Medal of Honor stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. "Son, do you have any idea what it takes to earn this medal? The kind of valor and sacrifice it represents?" "It's stolen?" Blackwood snapped, though uncertainty had begun creeping into his voice. "She's using it as a cover." More phones recorded the unfolding drama. The crowd's sympathy clearly lay with Iris, who maintained her dignity as she methodically repacked her duffel bag. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to Blackwood's increasingly agitated state. "Sir?" Officer Chen tried again, holding up a military ID card she'd retrieved from the floor. "These credentials appear completely legitimate. Perhaps we should—" "Take her to secondary screening," Blackwood cut her off, desperation evident in his voice, "and confiscate everything as evidence." Through it all, Iris remained focused on her surroundings even as she allowed the TSA agents to escort her toward the screening area. Her mind raced with calculations: Smith's presence, the 3 women, the likely security protocols he'd corrupted. While everyone focused on Blackwood's manufactured crisis, a real threat walked freely through the terminal. The crowd parted reluctantly as the agents led Iris away, many still recording with their phones. The elderly veteran clutched the Medal of Honor, refusing to hand it over to Blackwood despite his demands. "This is wrong," the veteran declared loudly. "This is not what we do to our service members." Blackwood stood amid the disapproving crowd, sweat now visible through his uniform as he watched his authority crumble. Yet he continued issuing orders, directing agents to gather evidence, even as more passengers pulled out their phones to record his behavior. Iris allowed herself to be led away, maintaining her military bearing despite the humiliation. Her eyes tracked the direction Smith had taken, memorizing details even as she appeared to submit to Blackwood's authority. The mission wasn't over. It had just become significantly more complicated. The terminal buzzed with angry conversations and the sounds of people making calls, many demanding to speak with airport management. But amid the chaos, most failed to notice the well-dressed man and his 3 companions passing through security at another checkpoint, their documents processed without a second glance. 2 airport police officers approached the secondary screening area, where Iris stood surrounded by TSA agents. Blackwood was gesturing animatedly, his face flushed, as he pointed at the scattered military documents on the table. "She's carrying forged credentials," Blackwood insisted to the officers. "Multiple forms of military identification, medals, even classified documents. This has to be some kind of security threat." Iris's attention remained divided between the unfolding confrontation and the direction where she'd last seen Smith. Through the glass partition, she could see more young women being escorted through a far security checkpoint. Her heart raced as she recognized the pattern: small groups, moving through different areas of the airport, all with the same fearful body language. "Officers," Iris said calmly, addressing the police directly. "There's an active trafficking operation happening right now in this terminal. Victor Smith, a known human trafficker, is moving victims through multiple security checkpoints." Blackwood stepped between Iris and the officers. "She's trying to create a diversion. This woman is becoming aggressive and uncooperative." "Sir," one of the police officers started, "we should at least look at her behavior." Blackwood grabbed Iris's arm as she tried to point toward the checkpoint, where she'd spotted more potential victims. "She's resisting security protocols." The crowd that had followed them to secondary screening pressed against the glass walls, phones still recording. The elderly veteran who had found the Medal of Honor was arguing with another TSA agent, refusing to surrender the medal as evidence. "That's enough." A woman's voice cut through the chaos. "I just got off the phone with Naval Intelligence." Officer Chen held up her phone, her expression both relieved and mortified. "Sir, she's telling the truth. Lieutenant Commander Iris Valdez is a decorated officer returning from a classified assignment." But Iris barely heard the validation of her identity. Her trained eye had caught something that made her blood run cold. A security guard at the far checkpoint giving Smith a subtle nod as another group passed through. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "This wasn't random," she said quietly, pieces falling into place. "You were told to stop me, weren't you, Agent Blackwood?" Blackwood's grip on her arm tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The trafficking network has people inside airport security," Iris continued, loud enough for the officers to hear. "That's why you targeted me specifically. They knew I was coming back with evidence." The police officers exchanged glances, their attention now fully focused on the situation. The crowd behind the glass had grown silent, straining to hear the exchange. "That's ridiculous," Blackwood sputtered, but his face had gone pale. "She's clearly delusional." "Agent Blackwood," Officer Chen interrupted, her phone still in hand. "Naval Intelligence is sending a team. They've confirmed Commander Valdez was investigating a trafficking operation with connections to multiple airports." Iris watched another young woman being led through a distant checkpoint. Every minute they delayed her meant another victim disappeared into Smith's network. She needed to act, but Blackwood's grip remained firm, his desperation becoming dangerous. "She's lying?" Blackwood's voice cracked. "This is all an elaborate cover story. She's the security threat." More passengers had gathered, their phones capturing every moment. Some were shouting in Iris's defense, while others watched uncertainly as the situation grew more intense. The elderly veteran had managed to push his way into the screening area, still clutching the Medal of Honor. "Son," he addressed Blackwood, "I served 40 years in the Marine Corps. I know a real service member when I see one, and I know what fear looks like when someone's been caught doing something wrong." Blackwood's composure cracked further. His eyes darted between the approaching police officers, the growing crowd, and the checkpoint where Smith's operation continued unabated. Sweat soaked through his uniform as the weight of his actions and their potential consequences became clear. "You don't understand," he whispered, his grip on Iris's arm finally loosening. "They said it would just be a routine stop. Just delay her long enough." "Long enough for what?" one of the police officers demanded, moving closer. But Iris's focus remained on the terminal beyond the glass. Another group of young women was approaching a checkpoint, their handler walking confidently ahead. Time was running out, and she had to make a choice. Pursue Smith now and risk letting his airport accomplices escape, or stay to ensure Blackwood and his co-conspirators faced justice. The trafficking kingpin she'd tracked across Eastern Europe was slipping away while she stood detained by his own security plant. The realization that her mission had been compromised from within filled her with cold anger, but she maintained her composure. Years of training had taught her that emotion clouded judgment, and she needed perfect clarity for what came next. The automatic doors of the security area swept open with a decisive whoosh. A woman in full naval dress uniform strode purposefully through, her commanding presence immediately drawing all eyes. Captain Rebecca Torres's polished insignia caught the fluorescent lighting as she surveyed the chaotic scene before her. "I am Captain Rebecca Torres, United States Navy," she announced, her voice carrying clear authority. "And I believe you're currently detaining one of my officers." The crowd fell silent. Blackwood's face drained of what little color remained as Captain Torres approached, flanked by two naval intelligence officers in civilian clothes. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez," Torres acknowledged Iris with a crisp nod. "I apologize for the delay in our response. Airport surveillance flagged this incident 20 minutes ago." Iris maintained her professional composure, though relief flickered in her eyes. "Captain, Victor Smith is currently moving trafficking victims through multiple checkpoints. We need to—" "Already in motion, Commander," Torres cut in smoothly. "Naval intelligence has teams at every exit. No one's getting away this time." She turned to address the police officers. "I trust you'll want to take Agent Blackwood into custody. We have evidence that he's been on the trafficking network's payroll for the past 18 months. The elderly veteran who still held Iris's Medal of Honor stepped forward. "Would someone mind explaining what's really going on here?" Captain Torres surveyed the crowd of passengers still recording with their phones. Her next words were clearly intended for everyone present. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez is returning from a 6-month deep cover operation across Eastern Europe. She successfully infiltrated an international trafficking network that's been using major airports as smuggling routes. Thanks to her work, we've identified corrupt officials at 12 different airports who've been paid to look the other way, or in this case, to actively interfere with law enforcement." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as understanding dawned. Several passengers who had been filming turned to glare at Blackwood, who seemed to shrink under their scrutiny. "That's why you had to humiliate her publicly," one woman called out, "to discredit her before she could report what she found." Captain Torres nodded grimly. "Exactly. The network knew Commander Valdez was returning today. They planned to create enough doubt about her identity and mental state that any immediate accusation she made would be dismissed as the ravings of a security threat. The police officers had already moved to handcuff Blackwood, who no longer offered any resistance. His earlier bravado had crumbled completely. "We've been tracking suspicious security incidents at multiple airports," Torres continued. "Legitimate law enforcement officers being delayed or detained on thin pretexts. But this was their most blatant attempt yet, publicly humiliating a decorated officer to protect their operation." The elderly veteran approached Captain Torres, carefully holding out the Medal of Honor. "Ma'am, I believe this belongs to your officer." He turned to Iris, his eyes bright with emotion. "I served in Vietnam. I know what this medal means. I'm sorry we all stood here and watched while they tried to destroy your reputation." Iris accepted the medal with quiet dignity. "You spoke up, sir. That matters." "Commander Valdez has spent the past 6 months gathering evidence against this network," Torres addressed the crowd again. "She's identified key players, documented their routes, and uncovered their methods, including their infiltration of airport security. Today's incident will be added to the federal investigation as a clear example of how deep this corruption runs." The crowd's mood had transformed completely. Where there had been uncertainty and suspicion, there was now anger on Iris's behalf and admiration for her service. Several passengers were wiping away tears. One of the naval intelligence officers approached Captain Torres and whispered something in her ear. She nodded sharply. "Commander Valdez, you'll be pleased to know that Victor Smith and 3 of his associates have just been apprehended at Gate C-16. The young women they were escorting are safe and will receive proper assistance." For the first time since the ordeal began, Iris allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Captain." "No, Commander," Torres replied firmly. "Thank you. Your willingness to endure this public humiliation rather than break cover, likely saved lives today. These traffickers thought they could use our own security systems against us. Instead, they've given us irrefutable proof of their methods. She gestured to the phones still recording. Sometimes the best weapon against corruption is simply letting people see the truth. The elderly veteran straightened to attention and saluted Iris. One by one, other veterans in the crowd did the same. Soon the entire terminal was applauding. Their earlier shock and uncertainty transformed into genuine appreciation for the quiet hero they'd almost failed to recognize. Captain Torres watched the display with satisfaction before turning back to Iris. "Now, Commander, I believe we have some trafficking victims who could use your expertise. Shall we?" A piercing alarm shattered the moment of triumph. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the terminal as a computerized voice blared, "Security alert. All passengers, please proceed to the nearest exit." Iris's training kicked in instantly. She scanned the crowd, catching glimpses of dark-suited men moving with too much purpose through the panicking passengers. These weren't scared travelers. They were Smith's professionals creating chaos. "Captain," Iris shouted over the din, "this is their backup plan." The terminal erupted into pandemonium. Passengers scattered in all directions, screaming and shoving as they rushed toward emergency exits. A child fell in the stampede, and Iris vaulted over a security barrier to scoop him up, depositing him safely with his terrified mother. "Everyone stay calm," Captain Torres commanded, but her voice was drowned out by the alarms and panic. Through the chaos, Iris spotted 3 of Smith's men herding their terrified trafficking victims toward a service corridor. A 4th operative raised his hand, and Iris caught the glint of a concealed weapon. "Gun!" she shouted, tackling an elderly couple behind a concrete pillar just as the shot cracked through the air. The bullet sparked off the metal detector frame where she'd been standing moments before. Blackwood, still in handcuffs, stared in shock as reality finally sank in. "They're really trying to kill her," he muttered. "Those girls," Iris called to Torres as she took cover. "Elena's with them, from my hometown. I promised her mother I'd bring her home." Another shot rang out, sending a new wave of screams through the crowd. The naval intelligence officers drew their weapons, but the mass of running passengers made it impossible to get a clear line of sight. "Blackwood?" Iris locked eyes with the detained agent. "That service corridor, where does it lead?" He hesitated, his worldview crumbling as he watched real criminals operate in his airport. Maintenance tunnels, they connect to the tarmac access roads. "Keys," Iris demanded, "for these security gates, now." One of the police officers quickly retrieved Blackwood's key ring. Iris caught it one-handed while scanning the terminal layout. "Commander, wait for backup," Torres ordered. But Iris was already moving, years of combat training evident in every fluid motion. She vaulted over the security desk, using it as cover as another bullet whizzed past. Keeping low, she sprinted toward the service corridor. 2 of Smith's men blocked her path. The first threw a punch that Iris deflected, using his momentum to slam him into a wall. The second pulled a knife, but Iris trapped his arm and dropped him with a precise strike to the throat. "Stop her!" Smith's voice carried from ahead. "She knows too much." Blackwood watched in astonishment as Iris expertly neutralized the armed men. This was no security threat. This was a highly trained officer risking her life to save trafficking victims. His own actions earlier seemed increasingly shameful. "The tunnels split 3 ways, he called out, straining against his handcuffs. "They'll be heading for exit point Charlie. It's the only one without camera coverage." Iris nodded briefly in acknowledgement as she reached the service door. The key worked, and she slipped through just as more shots peppered the wall behind her. Captain Torres was coordinating with airport police through her radio. "All units to Maintenance Tunnel Charlie. Armed suspects with hostages. Lieutenant Commander Valdez in pursuit." The elderly veteran who had held Iris's medal stepped forward. "Those girls they're trying to take? They're just children, aren't they?" "Yes," Torres confirmed grimly. "Some as young as 14. Commander Valdez spent months tracking this operation, gaining their trust. She promised to get them home. Blackwood felt sick. He'd been so focused on asserting his authority, on humiliating someone he'd profiled as suspicious, that he'd nearly helped human traffickers escape with their victims. "The tunnel system's a maze," he said urgently. "Your officer's heading into a trap. There's a shortcut through the baggage handling area. We could cut them off at the exit." Torres studied him for a moment, then nodded to one of the police officers. "Remove his cuffs. Agent Blackwood, consider this your chance to do the right thing." More shots echoed from the service corridor, followed by sounds of struggle. The alarms continued to blare as emergency responders tried to control the panicked crowd. And somewhere in the bowels of Miami International Airport, a decorated Navy officer pursued desperate criminals through darkened tunnels, determined to keep a promise to bring some lost girls home. The transformation in the terminal was complete. From a place of ordinary travel to a battleground where good and evil clashed in the fluorescent-lit corridors. And in that chaos, heroes and villains revealed their true nature as they always do when the moment of truth arrives. The maintenance tunnels echoed with footsteps as Iris navigated the dimly lit concrete passages. Emergency lights cast eerie red shadows along the walls, and the distant sound of alarms still filtered down from the terminal above. Her military training kept her movements precise and silent despite her exhaustion. Ahead, she heard the shuffling of multiple feet and muffled crying. Pressing herself against the cold wall, Iris edged closer to the sound. The tunnel opened into a wider junction area where service carts were stored. Through the shadows, she could make out Smith's men herding their victims toward the exit. A familiar face caught her eye, and Iris's heart nearly stopped. Elena Vasquez, the young mother from her hometown who had vanished 6 months ago while looking for work to support her 3-year-old daughter. Elena's disappearance had haunted their tight-knit community, leaving her little girl in the care of her grandmother. Elena's dark eyes met Iris's, widening in recognition. Hope flickered across her tear-stained face, but she quickly looked down, trying not to give away Iris's position. The other 2 girls, barely teenagers, huddled close to Elena as one of Smith's men roughly pushed them forward. "Move faster!" the man growled in heavily accented English. Iris's hand tightened on her weapon. Elena had been more than just another missing person. She had been the reason Iris accepted this undercover mission. The local police had dismissed Elena's disappearance as voluntary, but Iris knew better. She had promised Elena's mother she would find her daughter. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Iris spun, ready to fight, but found Blackwood holding up his hands in surrender. "The exit is around the next corner," he whispered. "There's a van waiting. I called it in. Backup is coming, but they're 5 minutes out." Before Iris could respond, Smith's voice boomed through the tunnel. "Commander Valdez, I know you're here." His accent made the words sharp and threatening. "Show yourself, or these girls start dying, one by one." Elena let out a small whimper as Smith pressed a gun to her temple. The 2 younger girls began crying harder, their sobs echoing off the concrete walls. "You have 30 seconds, Smith announced, "or the first one dies." Iris felt the weight of her promise to Elena's mother, remembered the photo of Elena's daughter clutching her favorite stuffed animal. She started to step forward, but Blackwood grabbed her arm. "Wait," he whispered urgently. "I was wrong about you, I see that now. But if you surrender, they'll kill you all anyway." 20 seconds? Smith's voice carried a cruel smile. Iris met Blackwood's eyes. Sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. 10 seconds. "I can create a distraction," Blackwood offered, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine concern. "Give you a chance to..." 5 seconds. Elena's quiet voice cut through the tension. "Sophia needs her mama." The mention of Elena's daughter steeled Iris's resolve. She stepped into the open, weapon raised. "Let them go, Smith." It's me you want." Smith's smile widened as he kept the gun pressed to Elena's head. Two of his men trained their weapons on Iris while the third guarded the other girls. "The noble American hero," he mocked. "Drop your weapon." Iris carefully set her gun down, her mind racing through combat scenarios. The odds weren't good. Too many hostages, too many angles to cover. "Now kick it away," Smith ordered. As Iris's foot connected with the weapon, Elena suddenly drove her elbow backward into Smith's stomach. He staggered, and chaos erupted. Iris launched herself forward as shots rang out, tackling one of the gunmen while Blackwood emerged from cover to engage another. Elena grabbed the younger girls and pulled them behind a service cart as bullets sparked off metal surfaces. Iris grappled with her opponent, using his own momentum to slam him into the wall. She heard Blackwood shouting into his radio for backup as he traded shots with the third gunman. Smith recovered and aimed at Elena, but Iris was faster. She threw herself between them as he pulled the trigger. White-hot pain exploded in her shoulder, but she kept moving, closing the distance. Her fist connected with Smith's jaw in a devastating uppercut that sent him crashing to the ground. The tunnel filled with shouts as airport police and Captain Torres's team finally arrived. Smith's remaining men surrendered, surrounded by drawn weapons. Elena rushed to Iris's side as she slumped against the wall, pressing her hand against the bleeding wound. "You came for me," Elena whispered in Spanish. "You really came?" "I promised your mother," Iris replied through gritted teeth. "Sophia needs her mama home." Tears streamed down Elena's face as she hugged Iris carefully. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up." Blackwood approached slowly, respect evident in his expression as he watched Iris comfort the traumatized woman. He had witnessed true heroism, not in dramatic speeches or displays of authority, but in the quiet determination to keep a promise and protect the innocent at any cost. Medical teams arrived to treat Iris's wound and check on the trafficking victims. Elena refused to leave Iris's side, holding her hand as the paramedics worked. The two younger girls clung to Elena, their savior throughout their ordeal, while Blackwood coordinated with airport police to secure the scene and gather evidence. Iris watched helplessly as Smith pressed the gun harder against Elena's temple. The young mother's eyes were squeezed shut, tears streaming down her face. The two teenage girls huddled together nearby, trembling under the watchful eyes of Smith's armed men. "You have a choice, Commander Valdez," Smith said, his voice echoing through the maintenance tunnel. "Surrender the evidence from your mission, all of it, and these women go free, or keep playing hero, and their blood is on your hands." Iris's mind raced. 6 months of undercover work had yielded proof of corruption, reaching the highest levels of airport security. Names, dates, shipping manifests, evidence that could bring down not just Smith but an entire international trafficking network. The flash drive in her boot contained everything needed to save countless future victims. But Elena's soft whimper brought Iris back to the present moment. She remembered the photo of Sophia, Elena's 3-year-old daughter, clutching her teddy bear at the candlelight vigil their community had held after her mother's disappearance. "Don't give him anything," Elena whispered in Spanish, her voice trembling but determined. "He's lying. He'll kill us anyway." One of Smith's men struck Elena across the face. "Quiet." The sharp sound of the slap made Iris flinch. Her shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed her, blood seeping through her torn shirt. The classified intel could save hundreds, but these 3 lives hung in the balance right now, real people, not just numbers in a report. Behind her, she heard Blackwood shift uncomfortably. The senior agent had positioned himself behind a concrete pillar, his service weapon drawn but useless, while Smith used the hostages as shields. "Time's running out, Commander," Smith taunted. "The evidence, or they die, starting with this one." He yanked Elena's head back by her hair. Blackwood's voice cut through the tension. "This is my fault. His words carried the weight of realization. I saw what I wanted to see, profiled you because of how you looked, your accent, my prejudice, helped them by keeping you detained. His voice cracked. And now these women might die because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. Focus, Agent Blackwood, Iris said firmly, though her own heart was breaking. Your guilt won't help them now. One of the teenage girls began to pray softly in Romanian. The sound transported Iris back to similar prayers she'd heard in safe houses across Eastern Europe during her mission. How many more would suffer if she gave up the evidence now? 10 seconds, Smith announced. Then I start shooting. Blackwood stepped partially out from behind the pillar. Let me make this right. I'll create a diversion. Stay back, Iris ordered. No more deaths today. 5 seconds. Elena caught Iris's gaze. In Spanish, she spoke quickly. Sofia needs to know her mama died fighting evil. Don't let him win. 3. Iris's hand moved toward her boot where the flash drive was hidden. 2. The teenage girls clutched each other tighter, their prayers growing louder. 1. Wait! Iris raised her hands. You win, Smith. The evidence is in my boot. Smith smiled coldly. Remove it slowly. As Iris bent down, she saw Blackwood's anguished expression. The senior agent understood what surrender meant, not just the loss of evidence, but the continuation of suffering for countless future victims. His voice was heavy with shame. I did this. My bias. My abuse of power. I helped them hurt innocent people. Faster, Smith barked. Iris's fingers touched the flash drive. In that moment, time seemed to slow. She saw Elena's determined face, thought of little Sofia waiting at home. She remembered every victim she'd tracked during her mission, every safe house raid that came too late, every empty bed representing another life destroyed. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Save 3 lives now, or save hundreds later. Complete the mission, or honor her promise to Elena's mother? The moral mathematics felt impossible. Now throw it here, Smith demanded. Iris straightened up, the flash drive clutched in her bloody hand. Elena's words echoed in her mind. Sofia needs to know her mama died fighting evil. Commander, please, Blackwood pleaded, understanding at last the true meaning of duty and sacrifice. There has to be another way. But Iris saw no other options, the evidence or the hostages, the mission or the immediate lives at stake, the greater good or the present evil. Her training had never prepared her for this impossible choice. Last chance, Smith said, his finger tightening on the trigger pressed against Elena's head. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy in Iris's hand as she stared at Elena's brave face, the terrified teenagers, and the man whose cruelty had brought them all to this moment of impossible decision. The mission's success or failure, lives saved or lost, all balanced on the next few seconds. Blackwood's earlier words rang in her ears. I was too proud to admit I was wrong. Now they both faced the consequences of pride and prejudice, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. The darkness of the moment pressed in around them as Iris prepared to make her choice. Iris's fingers tightened around the flash drive as her mind raced through possibilities. That's when she caught Blackwood's subtle hand signal, a gesture she recognized from her security briefings. He was indicating a blind spot in the camera coverage, just behind where Smith stood. The evidence isn't just on this drive, Iris said loudly, buying time as she interpreted Blackwood's meaning. There's a whole network that needs to be exposed. Blackwood stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised. Smith, listen to me. I know every inch of this airport's security system. That maintenance tunnel you're planning to use? It's already sealed off. My team activated the emergency protocols when the alarms went off. Smith's attention flickered to Blackwood for a split second, exactly what Iris needed. She caught Elena's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The young mother understood instantly, her body tensing in preparation. "You're lying," Smith snarled at Blackwood, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Check it yourself," Blackwood continued, taking another careful step. "Why do you think backup hasn't arrived yet? The whole section is locked down. Standard procedure after a security breach." As Smith turned slightly to bark orders at one of his men, Iris saw her opening. She launched the flash drive high into the air, the metallic casing catching the fluorescent lights. Everyone's eyes followed its arc. Everyone except Iris and Elena. In that split second, Elena drove her elbow back into Smith's ribs while Iris sprinted forward. Blackwood, proving his security training hadn't gone to waste, tackled one of Smith's men before he could raise his weapon. "Down!" Iris shouted to the teenage girls in Romanian. They dropped instantly as she engaged the second guard, her combat training taking over. Blackwood had already subdued his target and was calling for backup through his radio. "Security Command, this is Blackwood. Section C7, officer needs assistance, hostage situation." Smith recovered quickly, but Elena had scrambled away from him. He raised his gun toward the fleeing girls, but Iris was faster. She knocked the weapon from his hand with a precise strike, following through with a sweep that took his legs out from under him. "The cameras!" Blackwood shouted as he secured his unconscious target with flex cuffs. "There's a blind spot behind the electrical panel." Iris understood immediately. "Elena, get the girls to that panel. Stay behind it." She pointed to where Blackwood had indicated, keeping herself between Smith and the victims. As Elena shepherded the teenagers to safety, Blackwood moved to cover the maintenance tunnel entrance. "They'll try to send reinforcements through here. I know their protocol. I helped design it." His voice carried the weight of his guilt, but his hands were steady on his weapon. "We need to hold this position," Iris said, securing Smith's hands behind his back. "And we need to document everything. Your testimony about the security protocols being abused will be crucial." Blackwood nodded grimly. "I'll lose my job for this." "You'll help save lives," Iris corrected him. "That's worth more than any job." They could hear sirens in the distance now. Blackwood quickly outlined the security camera positions and patrol patterns, while Iris formulated a plan to secure both the evidence and the victim's safety. "The Human Trafficking Task Force has a safe house 20 minutes from here," Iris explained, "but we need to make sure these women are protected until they can testify." "I can help with that," Blackwood said. "I know which officers are clean and which ones might be compromised. There's a secure holding area in Terminal E that only senior agents can access. We can keep them safe there until your people arrive." Iris studied him for a moment, seeing not the prejudiced agent who had humiliated her, but a man choosing to risk everything to do what was right. Why the change of heart? Blackwood's face showed his shame. "Because I realized I'd become exactly what I was supposed to be fighting against. I used my authority to hurt innocent people instead of protecting them. When I saw you willing to sacrifice everything to save these women," he shook his head, "I knew I had to make a choice." "There's movement in the tunnel," Iris warned, hearing footsteps approaching. "Standard response team is 4 officers," Blackwood said quickly. "They'll come in a diamond formation. The team leader always takes point." Iris nodded, appreciating his insider knowledge. "Elena," she called out in Spanish, "keep everyone behind that panel. Don't move until I give the signal." "Ready?" Blackwood asked, positioning himself with a clear line of sight to the tunnel entrance. "Ready?" Iris confirmed. "And Blackwood? Thank you for choosing to do the right thing." He gave her a grim smile. "Let's make it count." Together, they braced for what was coming, their unlikely alliance forged in crisis now standing as the only thing between 3 innocent women and those who would harm them. Iris's combat expertise and Blackwood's intimate knowledge of airport security had given them a fighting chance. Now they just had to make it count. The response team burst from the tunnel exactly as Blackwood had predicted, 4 officers in diamond formation. But Iris noticed something off about their movements. "Those aren't real officers," she whispered to Blackwood. "Look at how they're holding their weapons. Military training, not law enforcement." Blackwood nodded grimly. Smith's men. They must have stolen uniforms from the security lockers. The terminal had grown eerily quiet. Passengers who hadn't fled during the initial chaos now pressed against the windows of nearby gates, phones raised to record everything. Iris knew they needed to end this quickly before more innocent people got hurt. "Elena," Iris called out in Spanish, keeping her voice steady, "when I give the signal, lead the girls toward Gate 32. Captain Torres will be waiting there with trusted officers." Blackwood keyed his radio. "This is Senior Agent Blackwood. We have 4 armed suspects in security uniforms approaching Section Charlie 7. They are not authorized personnel. I repeat, they are hostile forces in stolen uniforms." The fake response team hesitated, clearly not expecting their disguise to be compromised so quickly. That moment of uncertainty was all Iris needed. She launched herself forward, using a luggage cart as cover, while Blackwood laid down suppressing fire with his taser. The crowd gasped as Iris moved with practiced precision, disarming the first fake officer with a swift combination of strikes. Blackwood's accuracy with his taser dropped another, while the remaining 2 scrambled for cover behind a row of seats. "That's Lieutenant Commander Valdez," someone in the crowd shouted. "The officer they were harassing earlier?" The revelation spread through the terminal like wildfire. Phones clicked and flashed as passengers captured every moment of redemption. The same people who had witnessed her humiliation now watched in awe as she demonstrated her true capabilities. "Elena, now!" Iris shouted, engaging the 3rd attacker while Blackwood kept the 4th pinned down. Elena shepherded the teenage girls toward Gate 32, staying low and moving quickly. Captain Torres and her team emerged from the jetway, providing cover for their escape. "It's over, Smith," Iris declared, standing tall as Torres's team surrounded the area. "Your entire network is exposed. We have documentation of every corrupt official, every smuggling route, every account number." Smith, still restrained on the floor, snarled in frustration. "You have nothing?" "Actually," Blackwood stepped forward, his badge held high, "we have everything. I've spent the last hour transmitting security footage to federal authorities. Every camera angle, every compromised checkpoint, every falsified document. I helped create this security system. I know exactly how it was being abused." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Passengers who had been filming now streamed the entire takedown live across social media. The same terminal where Iris had been wrongfully profiled and humiliated now witnessed her triumph. Captain Torres approached with Elena and the other rescued women safely behind her. "Lieutenant Commander, the Human Trafficking Task Force is securing the scene. We've already arrested 3 corrupt officials who tried to flee when the evidence started coming in." Iris nodded, maintaining her professional composure despite her exhaustion. "The victims need immediate medical attention and protection. Elena has agreed to testify about the trafficking operation." "I will tell them everything," Elena said firmly, her voice stronger now. "For all the women who didn't escape, I will speak." More law enforcement units arrived, securing the suspects and collecting evidence. Passengers pressed forward, many apologizing to Iris for not speaking up during her earlier harassment. Some offered their own recordings as evidence of the discrimination she had faced. Blackwood stepped forward, his posture straight, but his eyes showing deep remorse. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez, I want to formally apologize for my actions earlier. I abused my authority and let prejudice cloud my judgment. I'm prepared to face any consequences." Iris studied him for a moment before responding. "Your actions at the end matter too, Agent Blackwood. You chose to help when it mattered most. That counts for something." The terminal burst into another round of applause as Iris and Blackwood shook hands. Phones captured the moment of reconciliation, a powerful image of redemption and justice that would soon spread across the nation. Captain Torres smiled. "Lieutenant Commander, I believe there are some reporters outside who would very much like to hear about how a routine airport screening turned into the takedown of an international trafficking ring. "With all due respect, Captain," Iris replied, "I'd rather focus on making sure Elena and the others get the care and protection they need. Their safety is more important than any story." The crowd's admiration visibly grew at her words. They had witnessed the full arc, from discrimination to vindication, and seen true heroism emerge. As medical teams arrived to treat the rescued women, passengers spontaneously formed a protective corridor, ensuring their privacy and dignity. Smith and his men were led away in handcuffs, their operation thoroughly exposed and dismantled. The same security cameras that had recorded Iris's humiliation now documented justice being served, creating an undeniable record of both institutional prejudice and the courage to overcome it. The days following the airport incident brought waves of change that transformed many lives. In a small community center in Miami's Latino neighborhood, Elena embraced her children for the first time in months. Tears flowed freely as her daughter Maria, age 7, and son Carlos, age 5, clung to their mother. Iris stood quietly in the background, watching the reunion she had helped make possible. "Tia, Iris." The children spotted her and ran over, wrapping their arms around her legs. Elena joined them, creating a group hug that made Iris's eyes water. "You brought our mama back," Maria said, her small face beaming with joy. Elena wiped tears from her eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez isn't just a hero to the whole country now. She's our family's guardian angel." The community center buzzed with activity as other rescued women reunited with their families. Support services had been arranged, with counselors and social workers ensuring each survivor received proper care and protection. The sight of so many families coming back together made all the risks worthwhile. At the Miami-Dade Police Department headquarters, Marcus Blackwood sat before an internal review board, accepting responsibility for his actions with newfound humility. "I let prejudice and power corrupt my judgment," he stated firmly. "I'm requesting reassignment to the Anti-Trafficking Task Force, not as a leader, but as someone willing to learn and make real change." The board, impressed by his honesty, agreed to a probationary period and mandatory sensitivity training. Outside the hearing room, Iris waited to speak with him. "That took courage," she said as he emerged. Blackwood nodded. "I've been thinking about what you said about actions mattering. I want my future actions to help prevent what happened to Elena and the others." "The task force could use someone who knows airport security systems inside and out," Iris offered, "especially someone who's learned to see beyond appearances." Their conversation was interrupted by Captain Torres, who approached with Commander James Mitchell, a fellow Navy officer who had witnessed the entire airport incident. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez," Torres announced with a smile, "the Navy wants to properly recognize your actions. There will be a formal ceremony next week." Commander Mitchell stepped forward, his admiration evident. "Your courage under fire was remarkable, Iris. Not just the physical bravery, but the dignity you maintained throughout the ordeal." Iris felt a flutter in her stomach at his use of her first name. She had noticed him watching her with increasing interest since the incident, and if she was honest with herself, the attraction was mutual. "Thank you, Commander Mitchell," she replied, meeting his warm gaze. "James, please," he said softly. "I was hoping you might join me for dinner tonight, to discuss your experiences with international operations, of course." "Of course," Iris answered, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Purely professional discussion." The ceremony the following week brought together all the threads of change the airport incident had created. In a packed auditorium, Iris received commendations from both military and civilian authorities. Elena and her family sat in the front row, alongside other survivors who had chosen to attend. "Lieutenant Commander Valdez represents the highest ideals of service," the Admiral declared. "Her actions not only saved lives, but exposed corruption and prejudice that had endangered countless others." Marcus Blackwood, seated with his new anti-trafficking unit colleagues, applauded with genuine respect. His own transformation had already begun to influence other security officers, leading to new training protocols and accountability measures. After the ceremony, James found Iris in the garden outside the auditorium. "That uniform suits you better than the undercover clothes," he teased gently. "Are you saying I didn't look good disheveled and suspicious?" she replied with a laugh. "You looked like someone I wanted to know better," he said, taking her hand. "Someone whose strength comes from caring about others more than herself." Their first kiss was interrupted by Elena's children running up to show Iris their drawings of her in her uniform. James stepped back with an understanding smile, watching as Iris knelt down to admire their artwork. "My hero doesn't wear a cape," Maria announced proudly, showing her crayon masterpiece. "The best heroes don't need them," James agreed, catching Iris's eye. With a look that promised many more moments together. As the sun set over Miami, Iris found herself surrounded by the family she had helped restore, the new relationships she had forged, and the promise of love blooming with James. Her mission had ended with more than just justice. It had created connections that would continue to transform lives, including her own. Elena hugged her one more time before leaving. "You didn't just save us, Iris. You showed everyone that real heroes come in all forms, speaking all languages, wearing all kinds of clothes. That's a gift that will keep giving." Thanks for spending a moment here with me. If this story touched you, let's keep this connection going. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.